Good afternoon, I'm Charmaine Colvin and you are listening to Apna Radio 93.9 Dublin South FM. On India this week, Russia is prepared to divert oil to India to offset Middle East supply disruptions with about 9.5 million barrels of Russian crude in vessels near Indian waters and able to arrive within weeks, according to an industry source. India is vulnerable to supply shocks, with crude stocks covering only about 25 days of demand, while refiners hold similarly limited inventories of gas oil, gasoline and liquefied petroleum gas. The disruption has immediate market consequences, with about 40% of India's crude imports moving through the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most vital export route. And the near closure of the route has compelled the number 3 oil consumer to seek alternatives. Indian refiners process about 5.6 million barrels per day of crude. The strait has become inaccessible after vehicles were struck by Iranian attacks that followed US and Israeli strikes on Iran-based targets that commenced on Saturday. India's imports of Russian crude fell to about 1.1 million barrels per day in January, the lowest since November 22, as New Delhi sought relief from US tariffs, pushing Moscow's share of overall oil imports down to 21.2%. The source said the shares climbed back up to around 30% in February. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has called for parties involved in the war in Iran to de-escalate hostilities quickly and said while he supports the strikes, it is a position he takes with regret. Carney, speaking to reporters in Sydney, his second stop on an Indo-Pacific tour, said of Iran that Canada has long supported the imperative of neutralising this grave global threat. In Sydney, Carney also faced questions about his conversations with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi earlier this week. He described those discussions as frank. Prior to the trip, a Canadian official suggested India is no longer linked to violent crimes or threats on Canadian soil. However, some Canadian Sikhs reject the government assessment, saying they still face threats from India, which Delhi denies. Carney added that high-ranking Canadian officials have been in contact with top Indian defence and national security officials from the moment that we re-established a dialogue at the leader level with India. Under Carney, the two governments are trying to repair ties that were strained when his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, publicly accused Delhi of a link to the 2023 assassination of Sikh separatist and Canadian citizen Hardeep Singh Nijjar in the province of British Columbia. India vociferously rejected the allegation by Trudeau. Trade and diplomatic relations almost came to a standstill as both sides expelled each other's diplomats and cancelled visa services. Canada hosts a huge expatriate Indian community. The case of 4 men charged over Nijjar's killing is still before the courts in British Columbia. This week, Canada and India also announced a landmark nuclear energy deal, as well as other deals on critical minerals, space, defence and education. India's Supreme Court has threatened legal consequences after a judge was found to have adjudicated on a property dispute using fake judgments generated by artificial intelligence. The top court, which was responding to an appeal by the defendants, will now examine the ruling given by the lower court in the southern state of Andhra Pradesh. The Supreme Court called the case a matter of institutional concern and said fake AI-generated judgments had a direct bearing on integrity of adjudicatory process. The incident had made headlines, becoming the latest in a series of instances where AI has disrupted court proceedings in India and elsewhere in the world. The problems in the case of Andhra Pradesh arose in August last year when a junior civil judge in the trial court in Vijayawada city passed an order in a case about a disputed property. The court had previously assigned an official to survey the property and file a report, which the defendants in the case objected to. The judge dismissed their objection, citing 4 past legal judgments, all of which were later found to be AI-generated. The defendants challenged the order in the state's High Court, pointing out that the cited orders were fake. The High Court acknowledged this but accepted that the junior civil judge had made the error in good faith and went on to agree with the trial court's decision anyway. The defendants appealed again, taking the matter to the Supreme Court, which was less forgiving about the impact of AI. Coming down sternly against the fake judgments, the top court last Friday stayed the lower court's order on the property dispute. It said the use of AI while making judgments was simply not an error in decision-making, but an act of misconduct. Last year, the Supreme Court published a white paper on AI in India's judiciary, in which it listed best practices as well as guidelines for AI use by judicial institutions, lawyers and clerks. The court stressed the need for human oversight and the importance of keeping institutional safeguards firmly in place. India will need to play with clarity and calmness to combat England's deep and powerful batting lineup in the T20 World Cup cricket semi-final at the Wankhede Stadium, the host bowling coach Morne Morkel said on Wednesday. India, bidding to become the first team to successfully defend the T20 World Cup title, meet two-time champions England today in the last four for the third straight tournament, with each team winning one of the previous games. And finally, millions of people are celebrating Holi, the festival of colours in India and across the world. The spring festival, which celebrates the victory of good over evil, also marks the end of winter. People offer prayers, smear bright colours on family and friends, and eat traditional food and sweets to celebrate. They also gather on the streets and throw colours on each other. Holi is based on the Hindu legend of Holika, a female demon who tries to kill her nephew, Prahlad, because he worships the Hindu god Vishnu. But Prahlad miraculously survives the burning fire, even as Holika is consumed by the flames. And that's all from me. You have been listening to Apna Radio 93.9 Dublin South FM.
Everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.